Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. Now, last week I spoke about stopping and allowing yourself time to enjoy the peak of the year. But what happens from now on in is really exciting, because all the colours are intensifying and the whole garden, every nook and cranny, is starting to fill up with glorious, rich colour. Joe visits the home of the designer John Blake, who reveals his tips for creating a stunning garden where there's not much room to play with.
We tend to go in large clumps of things we really love. It's a terrible mistake to put too many small things in a small space.
And we visit the house and garden of High Glano Manor near Monmouth, where colour and design work perfectly together.
The garden's typically arts and crafts, and the beauty of designing a house and garden as one is that you line up the windows with the garden features, so it's a perfect view.
And I will be revisiting my grass borders, making sure that they're looking as good as they possibly can for the rest of summer, as well as sowing some more carrots. Colour is a very personal thing, and you choose what works for you and your garden and the situation. But there are certain rules that you can follow and which do help. And for example, pink and orange don't work terribly well together, but contrasting colours set each other off. And as the sun is rising and it gets hotter and the light gets more intense, rich colours work really well together. And that's what we've done in the dual garden. So rich rubies and oranges and blues, and also there have to be in-between linking colours. And one of the absolute key plants in the dual garden is this geranium. It's geranium and folkard, because it does two things. On the one hand, the flowers, which are a really rich magenta, tie together pinks and reds and purples. They span that colour divide. And also the way the plant grows, it weaves in and out of other plants. It does this all summer long. And over here, we've got the clematis, gypsy queen. And what's fascinating about this is that when it's open and mature, you can see that it's distinctly violet purple. But when it's young, it's much more of a plum colour. It really changes as it grows. So you need to take into account the colours of the plant right the way through its performance, when it flowers, and absolutely critically, what it's flowering with.
A little bit of me and a whole lot of you. Add a dash of starlight and a dozen roses too. Then let it rise for 100 years or two. And that's a recipe for making love.
Of course, the best linking colour is foliage, because foliage will always last longer than any flower, and there's always more of it than any flower. So in the dual garden, we use purple foliage from the purple hazel, this sort of almost chocolatey colour of the cannas and the dahlias, which is a brilliant backdrop against oranges. And you get an intensification of colour. And then, very different colour, but just as dramatic, you have the lime green, almost golden touch of the sambucus. And that contrasts with the purple foliage. And it's great to intensify blues. And whereas purple foliage can, if the light's a bit low, suck in light, the golden foliage throws it out. So what you're doing is playing with colour, creating it, using flowers, using foliage. And I love that process.
And if you've made it right, you'll know it. It's not like anything you've made before. And if you've made it wrong, you'll know it. 'Cause it won't keep you coming back for more.
Now, of course, you don't have to make sure that everything is perfectly in accordance with a pre-laid plan. For example, these foxgloves, self-sown, and almost everything about them is wrong as regards the dual garden. The colours don't work, too pale, too pastel-y, some white ones, no white anywhere else in the dual garden. But everything about them as a flower is right. They're wonderful. I wouldn't dream of taking them out. So just remember, all rules are made to be broken.
That's the recipe for making love.
Now, I've been talking about exercising discrimination and choice about colour. And you can do that in any size garden, and it always makes things better. But if you've got a very small garden, some of those decisions have to be more radical, and not just about colour too. Everything has to be considered and edited down. And Joe has been to a small London garden where the choices seem to be all dead right.
If you've got a tiny garden and think that there's nothing that you can do with it, then think again. I'm here in North London and I've been invited to a garden that measures just 12 metres by 5. Now, I'm told it's a real gem and makes the most of its small proportions. This tiny garden lies nestled in the shade between two towering Victorian houses. I can instantly see that it uses a classic design solution, diagonals.
Putting things on a diagonal gives you more perspective, so you can look through things from one angle to another, and it means you don't waste space.
It's a clever technique because it brings the planting right into the middle of the garden rather than having a paved area with all the planting around the outside, which is a common mistake, I think. Another trick that John has used is to plant upwards into all that free space above the ground level with trees and tall shrubs. I think a lot of people are scared of putting trees and large shrubs in a small garden, but they're absolutely key for a bit of drama and drawing the eye through and around them.
It's a terrible mistake to put too many small things in a small space.
Yeah.
Everything, oh, I'd like one of those, I'd like one of those, and you get a very, very bitty thing. We've been quite kind of sparing in our choice of plant. We tend to go in large clumps of things we really love rather than have a bit of everything.
Now, hostas. Yeah. You're the only man I know who can grow beautiful hostas in the middle of London without much slug and snail damage. How have you done that?
I have to own up, I'm a hosta addict. And my wife has insisted I can't have any more. I think I've got about 45 different hostas. Basically, I go through all the tricks, but the main one is watering the ground with nematodes. That's a natural bug that eats other bugs. The other key thing, I think, is copper. Slugs and snails hate crawling over copper. And I keep pots off the ground with copper rings, and I put copper wire or copper banding around the tops of the pots.
In a small garden, every plant has to really earn its keep, and the fine details come to the forefront. I mean, look at this combination here. I absolutely love it, the way it holds the corner. It's like a pivotal point as you come down the stairs. We've got this heuchera in the pot here, sitting nice and upright. You really get up close to the foliage. And next to it, we've got this sedum red collie, a beautiful plant, and the colours link nicely together, but the forms are very different. But what I like about it is it draws the eye in. In a larger garden, a composition like this could easily get lost. Now, the smaller a garden gets, the more important the boundaries become because they're what you see around you at eye level. And here there's a mixture of boundaries. We've got a lovely frosted glass screen through there, creating privacy on the top balcony, a lovely rendered wall which links into the architecture of the house, and then these beautiful old brick walls which have been exposed in some areas and then covered in climbers with others. So there's a good variety through there. But at the back of the garden, Virginia creeper and ivies green it up completely, and what that does is trick the eye into not knowing exactly where the garden ends, so it makes it feel even bigger. I can never understand it when people say it's difficult to create an exciting garden in a small space. Sure, you need to do some research, get your plants in the right place, think about your boundaries and your layout and somewhere to sit. But that's the fun of it, creating something that is a haven in the city and a beautiful place to be.
I think that does just prove that a small garden, a tiny garden, can be full of interest, full of beauty and delight right throughout the year. Now, time to sow some carrots. When you're preparing soil for carrots, there are two things to consider. The first is it shouldn't be freshly composted or manured, and if you do that, you'll find that the carrots will fork and split. The same applies to parsnips. And the second thing is you want well-raked, free-drain soil. They don't like great clods of heavy soil. So break it down, dig it, and rake it fine. Now, it might feel a little late to be sowing carrots, but it's not. You can sow carrots in March, and you can sow carrots as late as the beginning of July, and you'll get a succession of crops. And carrots sown now will be ready to harvest in September and October. Now, there are two ways that I sow carrots. One is in rows, and the other is broadcast. And when I sow them in rows, I actually always use a plank, partly because it's good to stand on. It means you're not compacting the soil. And also it makes a very useful spacer, and I just draw a drill with the side of my hand like that, and then again the other side of the board, and that's pretty good spacing. And then you can see really clearly where you've sown them. And sowing them couldn't be easier. I've got a variety here called Nant 2, and the carrot seed has a corky quality. And sowing them is one of those things that I have very, very fond memories of from quite an early age. And very thinly sprinkle them along the row, all the way along, and then the other row. And there is nothing to be gained by sowing thickly, because the process of thinning attracts carrot fly, and carrot fly can be a bit of a nuisance. Now, cover them over. Carrot flies lay their eggs on the ground, and then the larvae hatch out and bore into the roots as they grow. They're attracted by the smell of carrots. And when you thin the carrots, you get an incredible aroma. Anyone who's grown carrots can immediately notice how even the smallest one smells beautifully carroty. Well, if you can smell it, the carrot fly can too. So I also sow broadcast to avoid thinning. And the advantage of that is it's easy, you just scatter the seed. The disadvantage is that it's hard to tell the difference between carrot seedlings and weed seedlings. So what I do is I measure out spacing with two boards, like that, and then I broadcast in the gap between the boards. So I've got a nice sharp edge. So I know everything in that area is carrot, and everything outside it can be hoed and weeded, and that tends to work pretty well. I'm just going to broadcast that thinly. And this is a variety I've not grown before, called Oxenhall. As long as I just thin to eat, the ones left in the ground get bigger and bigger. And by the time you get to November, when the effects of carrot fly really start to kick in and you get these honeycombed carrots with black holes in them, they've all been eaten up. If you don't want to do that, simply put a barrier up. And you can do it two ways. You can either put a physical barrier over the top and keep it firmly pegged down and only lift it to harvest, or you put a little fence around them of fleece. And it only needs to be 3 foot high because the carrot fly flies very low to the ground. Just rake over them lightly, gently covering them. So they're in the ground. We're not getting too worried about carrot fly because we're going to eat them before the larvae can, but the final thing to do is give them a good soak. Now, this is just to promote germination, and the seed will go against warm, moist soil and will germinate really quickly. And that's one of the advantages of sowing carrots at this time of year as opposed to spring. Well, there we are. Job done. Now, you may not want to sow carrots this weekend, but here are some other jobs that you can be getting on with. If you planted a hedge or trees this winter or spring, it's important to water them regularly, especially in dry weather. Don't use a sprinkler, but make sure the water goes straight to the roots and give them a really generous soak. Better to do this once a fortnight than a light sprinkle every day. You only have to do this for their first year, and it sets them off to a long, healthy life. At this stage of the season, it's important to encourage your tomatoes to be strong, healthy plants. You can help with this by tying them in regularly using soft twine so there's no stress or strain on the growing stem. Pinch out side shoots that will grow at 45 degrees between the stem and the leaves. Water them regularly, giving them a really good soak at least once a week. And if you feed them, do so with a general purpose feed. In the summer months, don't worry about your greenhouse getting too cool, but overheating is a real problem. So first thing in the morning, open up the doors, windows and any vents and let the air flow through. And as well as watering plants, also water the floor every day. And this will get humidity into the air. And the combination of ventilation and humidity will help prevent most greenhouse problems. I planted this vine last April. It grew well last year, but of course had no fruit. This year, we've got 4 bunches of fruit. Now, you could remove those and the vine will grow stronger and future years might give you a bigger harvest. But that's very purist. Come on, it's too exciting to get some grapes just to get rid of them, and who knows what will happen next year. So I'm keeping these, but it is important to prune back the side shoots. These side shoots, in time, will bear fruit. But to prune them back to about 4 or 5 leaves each, like that, and like that. So we're putting the energy into the main stem rather than the side shoots. So that can come back to there. We'll take that off. So what I've got is a nice stem going along that wire, and that will go to the end of the greenhouse. I've got another one going up there, and in time I'm going to train that right along the top. So we've got 2 tendrils running along the length of the greenhouse, and the idea is it'll be festooned with glorious black Hamburg grapes. And that may come in a year or two's time. One of the heydays of greenhouse gardening was the Edwardian era, at the end of the 19th, the beginning of the 20th century. It's one of my favourite eras of garden design. And High Glano Manor in Monmouthshire was one arts and crafts garden of that era, but it had all but been lost until new owners discovered and resurrected it.
When we actually bought this house, we had no intention of moving. We were very happy in our other house. And one coffee time, my husband was rather bored and said, well, should we go and see that house? The designer of the house and garden was Henry Avery Tipping, and he was the architectural editor of Country Life magazine. When he designed this house and garden in 1923, it was just after the end of the First World War. He bought this land and then he decided it was the ideal place to make his sort of retirement cottage. The garden's typically arts and crafts. The arts and crafts movement really believed in getting back to nature. It was a sort of reaction to the industrial age. The house has got lots of stone, oak, local vernacular architecture, and the planting in the garden matches in that it was sort of big drifts of herbaceous plants which softens the hard architectural lines. When we bought the house, there really was no herbaceous planting left. The top of the pergola had fallen down, and Tipping's famous ribbon parterre had been replaced by a hideous turquoise swimming pool. And I wrote to Country Life and asked if they had any photographs of the house and garden. And eventually 24 wonderful black and white images came that Tipping had taken for Country Life in 1927. And that gave me the most marvellous steer for putting the garden back to the original 1923 design. In an arts and crafts house, the beauty of designing a house and garden as one is that you line up the windows with the garden features, so it's a perfect view. Tipping, in every single house he had a garden room where he could eat outside in the spring when the weather was clement, and he could have the doors slid back so he could really enjoy nature. We love this garden room because this faces west with the view out over the Vale of Usk, and you get the sunsets on this side, and we stop every night at 6 o'clock and have a glass of wine in this room, and it's actually one of the nicest rooms of this house. So all along this upper west terrace, I've planted roses with arts and crafts names. Charles Rennie Mackintosh, William Morris, Gertrude Jekyll. They're all in hues of pinks, and I think they look so nice against this natural stonework. I've tried to keep the same atmosphere with the really blousy planting and the big drifts of colour in sort of soft hues. When I plant something in the border, I put 7 plants in. I never put 1 in, because it just doesn't give it the right feeling or the atmosphere. The proportions of these arts and crafts gardens is really important. These mirror herbaceous borders are exactly 100 feet long. The dry stone wall on the lower terrace is 50 feet long. And the big columns on the pergola are exactly 10 feet apart. So you've got proper proportion and scale in the garden. And that gives the stonework a real harmony with the planting. I love delphiniums, so, you know, I use those as the focal points all down the borders because I love the sort of stateliness, and I've introduced lots of things, but they're in the style of Tipping. Tipping said that you must never put too much in a garden because it spoils the simplicity. So I listened to that as I designed these borders.
Now, you wouldn't find borders like this in any Edwardian garden. This is a style that evolved around the use of grasses about a quarter of a century ago in Holland, Belgium and Germany. And I love it. I love the way that you get the structure from these strong verticals of plants like the calamagrostis and the delicacy of grasses like the steepers. And then amongst them, you can interweave perennials and annuals and climbers in a very, very loose way. Now, up until this year, that looseness was contained, corseted even, by tightly clipped box hedges. And I like that contrast very much. But we got box blight. And I was forced to dig up the box hedges to stop it spreading even further and burn them. You know what? I prefer it without the box. Although I never would have chosen to do it voluntarily, I'm glad that it happened, because it has allowed this part of the garden to breathe. However, there are still 1 or 2 things that I need to do as a result of removing those hedges. where I took the hedges out, in their place are hedges, if you like, of poppies. These are opium poppies that have been stimulated into germination by the digging up of the soil. And if you think of the poppies in the First World War, that suddenly came into flower because all the shells churned up the ground. And it's that disturbance of soil, the exposure of seeds to light, that triggers germination. Now, poppies are lovely, and I don't want to get rid of them. However, they will pass, and I do want to add some grasses. And I've sowed some annual grasses. This is Brizza maxima, quaking grass, with these lovely little flowers and then seed heads that look like delicate bobbling beads. And they're called quaking grass because they move and they shimmer, and as they dry, they make a little sound. And actually, that's one of the real bonuses of growing grasses in a border. You get fabulous sibilant sound as the wind sifts through the foliage. Try saying that when you've had 3 glasses of gin and tonic. I can pop probably a couple of breezes in there, and you can see they've got a good root system, and put them in some sunshine there. Of course, a packet of seeds gives you scores of plants. I've got 3 trays of these from 1 packet of seeds. And they look pretty hidden at the moment, but they will grow and they will work. I'm going to plant a few little clumps all the way along. Now, these will grow and look good. They won't grow very big, just maybe twice the size they are now. And then as we go into autumn, they'll start to turn and dry. And in fact, like many of the grasses, they're probably at their very best from the middle of September to the middle of October. And then when the cold weather comes, they will die back. But that doesn't matter. They will have given us really good value for their short growing lives, and we can grow some more seed next spring. Now, obviously, any plant at this time of year, any annual grass that you grow, water in really well. Give it a soak, give it a good start in life, and then they're all tough plants, and they'll need very little care and attention. Well, that's it for today. Bye-bye. Come on in, Nigel. Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. I always feel that July is the start of the harvest season. And of course that means lovely vegetables from the garden, but also don't neglect the flowers. I try and every few days cut some roses, just from whatever is out. In the hot sun, that won't last more than a day. But if I take it inside into a cool room, that'll give me an extra 24 hours of pleasure. This week, I'll be continuing to develop the wildlife meadow that I sowed last year. Joe gets an exclusive behind-the-scenes tour of the private gardens at Eton College, where Princes William and Harry went to school.
It's like a secret garden in here. I came through the gate and what a beautiful space.
It's a centre of excellence for education, isn't it? So we try and do that in the gardens.
Carol is looking at the wildlife that is so beneficial for our gardens. This week, she's dipping below the surface of a garden pond.
What's actually important for the creatures that live in here isn't the species of plant, but it's the variety of structure and shape, because each one of these will then create a different niche or a habitat, if you like, that particular types of insect will prefer.
Every year, I try and plan it so I have new potatoes on my birthday, which is at the beginning of July. So now is the time to see if they're ready. You can tell if potatoes are likely to be ready by a number of things. The first is they must flower. And these have flowered and finished flowering, so I would expect there to be tubers. The second is there's a pretty good guide that first earlies taking 3 months, main crop 4 months, and second early somewhere in between. So this is Charlotte, which is a second early. Oh, look at that. Now, I challenge anybody, it doesn't matter how many years you've gardened, doesn't that make your heart sing? If they're wet or damp, leave them on the surface of the ground to dry off, but these are actually pretty dry, so they don't need it. There we go. A little bit of green on that. The green is poisonous, of course. You shouldn't eat that. Charlotte is a variety that I've come to love. It's a French variety, slightly waxy, and they're really good just plain boiled, eaten either with some butter or olive oil and plenty of salt and pepper. It's worth taking some trouble to get every last little one out the ground, because the chances are they will grow new plants next year. And that might sound like plants for free, but there are two downsides. One is that you grow potatoes on a rotation, so they'll be growing up through a different crop next year. And two, potatoes can accumulate viruses, so it's not a bad idea to buy fresh every year from a reputable grower. Right, that's enough potatoes to keep the Don household going for the next few days. The rest can stay in the ground. Over here, I've got some courgettes, and courgettes have done really well so far this summer. I wouldn't want a courgette any bigger than that, and I'm very happy to take them quite a bit smaller. This is a variety called Black Beauty. Obviously, the more you pick, the more that will grow. And of course, you can eat the flowers on the end too. There's a delicious dish, which is to deep fry them in a very light batter and stuff them with a soft cheese. So you have this hot, deep-fried flour and then the warm cheese, and then that sort of melts through it and it's slightly crispy. It's absolutely delicious. Now, these are vegetables ready for eating now, but I want to clear a bed so I can plant out some veg that will give me a harvest later on in the year. This looks pretty scruffy by now. It's rocket. Sowed it on the 1st of February, planted it out in March, and we've been eating it since mid-March. And you can see that it's producing more flowers than leaves now. That's not a terrible thing, because rocket flowers, like courgette flowers, are very good to eat. But it's a law of diminishing returns. So, pull up the plants. There is already a lot of organic material in this raised bed, but it's a good idea every time you clear a crop to add a thin layer of compost, and that just recharges it. I'm going to plant some sweet corn. It needs a sunny position and good, rich soil, and I'm going to space it quite widely apart in a grid, and the grid is really important. That's because sweet corn pollinates via the wind. The wind blows the pollen from plant to plant. If you have them in a grid, it doesn't matter which direction the wind is coming from, they will all catch it at some point and they will all be pollinated. Now, those are in the ground and will be quite happy and need no attention at all, but they'll grow slowly. But I can use the space, and a really good companion crop are courgettes, because they will share the same growing conditions of sun, a nice rich soil, but provide their fruits before they get shaded out by the sweet corn. And I'll just fit 4 plants in here, nicely spaced out so they can spread. You can plant lettuces or anything that will give you a quick harvest in amongst the slower growing sweet corn. And it's not too late to directly sow courgette seeds or sweet corn, because the soil is warm, but it will depend on nice warm weather for the rest of summer for them to grow fast and to ripen. Now, this is all very practical, but over the last few weeks, Joe has been looking at the beautiful decorative gardens that lie behind some of our more famous institutions, often gardens which people rarely get the opportunity to see. And a few weeks ago, he went to a school, but not just any old school.
Eton is probably the most famous public school in the world. It has a long list of distinguished former pupils, including 19 British Prime Ministers and the future King, Prince William, and his brother, Prince Harry. The college was founded by Henry VI more than 500 years ago. Today, the grounds cover 900 acres, including numerous sports pitches and several private gardens. These hidden gems are only open to the public one day a year for the National Garden Scheme. The job of keeping these gardens looking at their best falls to head gardener Michael Long and his team. Hi, Michael.
Hi,
Lovely
Joe.
to meet you.
And you?
What a fabulous, it's like a secret garden in here. I came through the gate and what a beautiful space.
It is, it's fantastic, isn't it? This is the headmaster's garden. It's only for use by the headmaster. The pupils don't get to come in here.
So you've been involved in the design of this garden. Why have you designed it like this?
Basically, the headmaster's wife likes flower arranging. She does it in the house and in the chapel.
Yeah.
And the idea is to cut the flowers from the garden. We try to make it a bit of a cutting garden. It's a centre of excellence for education, isn't it? So we'd like to try and do that in the gardens.
So which one of these gardens is your favourite?
Luxmore's the island garden.
Oh. Put the tools down.
Yeah.
Wow, this is a beautiful bridge, isn't it?
It is, isn't it?
Stunning. So this is the River Thames?
Yes.
OK. So you'd never know it. Beautiful.
Welcome to Luxmore's Island.
That's a very exotic name, isn't it? Why is it called that?
The garden was originally started by Mr. Luxmore, who was a housemaster at Eton. He taught here for about 50 years in the 1800s.
Why is it your favourite?
I think partly it's so different to the other gardens because they're quite formal and this one is very informal. And it's so peaceful and you can come over here and if everything's quiet, you could be anywhere.
So are the pupils allowed onto the island?
Yes, they are. The older boys are allowed on the island for study, quiet time, and the younger boys can come on with a tutor to do sort of private lessons.
Does this garden have a specific planting palette?
There's a book called Luxmore Letters, which we've looked through and we've picked out plants that Mr. Luxmore used. So we use similar plants to those. There's things like Hemericalis, roses, irises.
Yeah, also traditional English garden plants, really.
Yeah, a lot of these plants have been here quite a while.
In a way, you're gardening in a snapshot in time. Do you feel a real responsibility?
Yeah, absolutely, because this garden's hopefully going to be here another 100+ years. You know, so we've got to look after it for the next generation of gardeners to take over.
Eton hasn't just educated British royalty. Members of royal families from around the world have come here, including many years ago the King of Siam, who donated money which was used to build another garden which feels quite different from the others. Oh, this is beautiful, this garden. I love the sunken nature of it.
This was originally done in 1929, but it's recently been redesigned.
You can tell it's got a slightly modern edge to the planting.
Yes.
But a lot of harmony. Oh, it looks fantastic, I have to say.
It's nice. They're all small beds, so you can get to everything quite easily.
The iris and the catmint and the hesperis with the cow parsley, that is beautiful.
It's very nice, and I mean, it's the one everybody sees. This is the one garden that everybody who walks past sees.
Because, the public can walk past here.
Yes.
Another garden is for the use of the provost, who is officially in charge of the college and appointed by the Crown. This is my first time ever in these gardens, and I think it's fantastic that you open them to the public on a Yellow Book Day.
Well, we love to see the public here because we're proud of what the gardeners do. I mean, it's lovely to see people coming through, real experts, a lot of them, talking in horticultural Latin, which I'm afraid is beyond me. They're incredibly lucky, the boys here, to have this beautiful surroundings. And the fact is that we do seem to produce a steady stream of good gardeners.
Yeah.
So some of it gets into their minds, I think. And a lot of them do appreciate just the sheer beauty and the luck they have to be in these surroundings.
Now, the garden that I'm making here on what we call the mound is very different. This was a rubbish heap for nearly a quarter of a century. And last year, we thought we would sort it out and try and make a wildflower meadow. And that's work in progress, but it is at last coming along. And the theme of this piece of the garden is to encourage as many wild and indigenous plants as we possibly can. And it certainly is beginning to look a bit wild. But this was sown just about a year ago. It may look like the sort of growth you get on a rubbish heap or by the side of the road, but actually there's a lot of really interesting stuff in that. Now, the seed mix that I sowed in the middle of last July contained grasses, which are here, and although they've been bashed by rain, they've established and grown quite strongly. But they also had some wildflowers in it, like these clovers, which have come through. There's silene, both the white silene and the pink. And Viper's bugloss was in the mix. You can see here. And this will seed in turn and then spread. A wildflower meadow needs careful tending, needs gardening. You do need to let the plants that you want to keep seed, and to make sure the plants that you don't want to keep don't seed. This dock here is developing seeds, and I don't want those to spread. So I can put the hoe down at the base of the plant and jab in like that. That cuts it off at the roots. I can pull it out. And importantly, the seeds won't spread and germinate. This plant here is hemlock. It's poisonous, really quite poisonous. And you can tell it's got these lovely white umbellifer flowers and then the very distinctive purple blodgy stem. If you have got it, I'd wear gloves when you handle it. So we'll just chop that out like that, and I will collect that up with gloves. Here we have a sow thistle, and they can be a bit of a weed. So I'm going to chop that out. There we go. And I'll gather that up. There you go. Out you come.
This is the meadow's second summer, and each year, after the grasses and wildflowers have set seed, it must be cut down and all the mown material taken away. This will reduce the nutrients for the grasses and allow the wildflowers to compete, and gradually, over the years, to thrive.
This is one of those weeding jobs that I really like, because it gives you a chance to get in and enjoy the garden, to see it up close and from the inside, rather than always looking on it from the outside. And it's something to do slowly, something I'll probably spend another half hour or so doing. But even if you haven't got any weeding jobs to do, here are some other things to get on with this weekend.
If you grow chives, they may well not be looking very good at the moment. However, you can easily rejuvenate them by cutting them back hard to the ground. Give them a really good soak, and within days, you'll have a fresh flush of foliage. By now, your autumn fruiting raspberries should have sent up plenty of new shoots. But before they become top-heavy, it's a good time to support them. Put some stakes securely into the ground and stretch string between them, which will keep the canes upright and make them much easier to pick. So far, it's been a wonderful year for clematis, and they've really enjoyed the wet winter and spring, but this has resulted in a lot of extra lush growth, and it's a good idea to gather them up now and tie them into any support to give them extra protection against summer storms.
Increasingly, more and more of us are learning to appreciate both the wildlife we see in our gardens and the value that they add to the health of our gardens. And over the coming few weeks, Carol is going to be looking at the various creatures that we can share our backyards with and the best ways of enticing them in.
In sunny borders and in shady corners, under rocks and amongst the trees and leaves, live a myriad of creatures, part of an intricate chain to which we all belong. I want to find out what this means to us, our plants and the sanctuaries we call our gardens. In Britain, we've created more than 2.5 million garden ponds. Water plays a very significant part in the designs that we love. But what more does it contribute other than its visual appeal? Steve Head is a zoologist who, for the last 15 years, has been developing and studying his garden pond to attract wildlife. It's incredibly beautiful, but what are the real reasons for having a wildlife pond in your own garden?
Well, I think you want a pond in your garden because it's such a source of life in the garden. Because so many specific insects like the pond, need the pond, but then there's all the other creatures that will make use of it, including some quite unexpected ones. Bees, on a hot day, a honeybee hive needs litres of water to keep the hive cool and air-conditioned to evaporate.
When you think of a wildlife pond, immediately you think about native plants, and yet you've got lots of plants that are ornamental, haven't you, non-native?
Yeah, things like the astilbe are in there because they're just so extraordinarily colourful.
Yeah.
But we got some native species in here as well. There's the lovely thing bogbean here. It has an extraordinary triple leaf, but the most gorgeous little delicate white flower, and the veronica beyond. But what's actually important for the creatures that live in here isn't the species of plant, but it's the variety of structure and shape, because each one will have its own shape of stem, its own shape of leaves, its own shape of roots particularly. And each one of these will then create a different niche or a habitat, if you like, particular types of insect will prefer.
To look at the intricate habitats that lie beneath, we're using a special camera to glimpse a newt's eye view of the underwater landscape.
Oh, that's an extraordinary shot going in under the surface. And you can see the submerged leaves, and there's a root there appearing at the bottom. When we look around, it sort of emphasises just how much structure there is underwater there.
So if you're starting a pond, how does all this life get in there in the first place?
Insect life comes in of its own accord almost immediately. And it's remarkable how many plants will come in just on the legs of birds, you know, seeds and so on coming in that way.
Oh, there's a snail. Can you see
Oh,
him?
yeah, there we are. Of course, that's a snail which is confined to the pond. It doesn't come out and eat your cabbages, so it's completely safe in the garden. But, you know, everything else that we get in the pond, like the newts and the frogs and the toads even, are tremendous predators of those unfortunate things like slugs, which we all love to hate. What we could do now is see if we can find some of the creatures we've been talking about so that we can look at them a bit more clearly.
Let's have a look what we've
Yeah,
got.
let's see what we've got in here. Got quite a few bits and pieces. I think the star in many ways is that caddisfly larva. Or rather, we're not actually seeing the larva which is hiding away inside this case, which is made out of little tiny dead shells and bits of vegetation glued together.
You can actually see snails' shells,
Yeah.
can't you?
And, of course, we've got lots and lots and lots of snails in here.
Snails live close to the surface, don't they? And
They live quite...
hoover everything up.
You even see them actually upside down feeding off the surface layer and generally keeping the pond really clean.
But, I mean, the most handsome things in here are the newts.
These are the common newt.
Yeah.
Newts have got a fascinating life cycle. And what happens is that they come into the pond sort of February, March, and they mate, and then the female lays their eggs, one at a time generally, on a little bit of flat pondweed, which they then fold over to protect it. And when the eggs hatch, they turn into an extraordinary tadpole-y thing. It's got external gills, and they'll live as a tadpole usually for 6 months or so. And then they lose these gills, they become air-breathing, and they climb out of the pond, and they stay out of the pond for anything up to 2 years, feeding completely as if they were terrestrial animals. And then, of course, when they're ready, as the first warm days occur in late winter, early spring, back they come to the pond, and they start the life cycle over again. We got something else in here which I particularly like, and that's this wonderful big dragonfly larva here. This is the tiger of the pond world. They're significant predators on just about everything else in the pond.
Where are their eggs laid?
The females lay their eggs directly into the water, at the top of the water, and they hatch out to make little tiny nymphs. And they grow up, they shed their skin several times until they get to this sort of size.
How long does that take?
Well, it can take 6 months, or depending on the weather and, again, the species, it can take actually anything up to 5 years. And when they're ready, they then crawl through the water surface up a steep stem, and they break the skin over the back. And out of this really quite ugly, strange-looking aquatic animal bursts forth an adult dragonfly, and they have to pause while they inflate the wings and get ready. But within an hour, they'll be off, flying into the sunshine.
I think the thing is, even if you've got a really tiny garden, you can still have water in it, can't you?
Yes, you can. And both the wildlife and us can really rejoice in this beautiful habitat we've created.
And isn't it just gorgeous?
There's no question that adding the pond to Longmeadow has dramatically increased the wildlife, and the pond is bound to make your garden healthier and much richer. Now, I've been contacted by Tracy from Yorkshire, and she says, "Dear Monty, I was given a quince tree for my birthday, and I planted it last autumn, and it was doing really well. However, over the last few weeks, it's developed nasty brown spots all over the leaves and is now looking very sorry for itself. Do you know what it could be, and can it be rescued?" And the answer to both is yes. Now, this is quince leaf blight, and I've got it on my own quinces on the other side of the pond. It starts out as rather browny red blotches that then spread and become black. The leaves quite often then turn yellow and fall off. But actually, it's not a total disaster. The trees recover. Next year, there's no guarantee that they will get it, and they will give you a really good crop of quinces. But collect up all the leaves and burn them. We've had a very wet, mild winter and spring, and this has encouraged the fungus that causes the blight. It's also encouraged powdery mildew. And my quinces, on the other side of the pond, have got both. This quince has got a really clear case of leaf blight. The leaves are splotched with brown, and they're starting to crisp and die back, and these will fall. But this one isn't too bad. I'm not too worried about it. But I've got 4 quinces here, and one of them is much worse.
Now, the blight and mildew won't kill my quince trees, but to reduce the spread of the fungi, I've decided to take the drastic action of cutting down the worst affected one, which will help the remaining 3.
Now, this one in particular is really bad. I've planned to take it out. That will let ventilation in, air, a little bit more rain, light, and just take that off. Look at the combination of blight and mildew on that. The mildew is a powdery, felted covering on the underneath of the leaf, and the blight is there too. if you're cutting down any tree, do it slowly, bit by bit, a really sharp saw, and just take control of the operation. Don't hack at it and then hope it falls where you want it to. One quince less in my life. Now, I could dig out the stump, but I don't think there's any need. I'll plant around the roots and chop through them. And whilst it's sad, it's done well. I've eaten of the quinces, and hopefully everything else will do better. That's part of the cycle of the garden. But that's it for this week. Bye-bye.